Hello friends, it's Cindy Brumbaugh from CindyLeeBDesigns.com, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. Today I'd like to show you a bridge fold card. As you can see, when I fold it in either direction, it folds flat to fit into an A2 sized envelope. But when you sit it on a flat surface, it sits upright with this neat bridge across it to give more dimension to your card. So to make this card, we're going to be using a color palette of Tranquil Tide. So you're going to need your Tranquil Tide ink pad. You're going to be using a stamp set out of the new Occasions catalog on page 27 called Hold On to Hope. It comes with this stamp set, Hold On to Hope, that at first glance you think of it as an encouragement or a sympathy stamp set, but whenever you look at this middle sentiment, celebrating one of God's most remarkable creations, this stamp set becomes a birthday stamp set, a christening stamp set, a baptism stamp set, or a confirmation stamp set. You could even use it for a bridal shower. So very versatile stamp set. It comes with the Cross of Hope framelits dies that cut out many different images in the stamp set, but also comes with 3 additional dies that don't come with images, but you can use for other projects. We'll be using this die on our card, and then there's a small cross and another thinner cross that can be layered on this larger cross. So to make this card, since I used Tranquil Tide ink, I used Tranquil Tide cardstock, and then I used the Fresh Florals paper stack. Now that's the paper stack that comes in 12 by 12 pieces of designer paper, and there's 40 sheets to a pack, and this year Stampin' Up! Used it for our 5 in colors that are good this year and next year, and I used the Tranquil Tide designer paper on that. You're going to need your layering ovals framelits and your stitch shapes framelits for this card. So to get started, let's look at the measurements for the Tranquil Tide. Now your card base that folds is going to be 4 1/4 by 8 inches. You're going to score it at 1 1/4, 2 1/2, 5 1/2, and 6 3/4. So 4 1/4 by 8 inches scored at 1 1/4, 2 1/2, 5 1/2, and 6 3/4. You're going to need the bridge that goes across the front of the card, and that's going to be 5 1/2 by 1 inch. 5 1/2 by 1 inch. The piece of white, Whisper White, that goes across the bridge that we're going to stamp the sentiment on, Hold On to Hope, it's going to be 3/4 of an inch by 5 1/4. We're going to be using 2 strips of the Fresh Florals Tranquil Tide, and that's going to measure 4 inches by 1 inch. So 4 inches by 1 inch, we're going to need 2 of them, and you can get a lot of these pieces of paper out of a 12 by 12 sheet of designer paper. And all of these measurements will be on my blog post for this card. Now this back portion that sits in the back of the card, we're going to cut that to 2 3/4 by 4. So 2 3/4 by 4, and that's what we're going to be stamping the beautiful foliage on. Now on the back of the card where you're going to write your message, where I just stamped a little bit of the foliage there, that's going to also be 2 3/4 by 4. So you'll need 2 pieces of Whisper White cut to 2 3/4 by 4. And then I just stamped some of the foliage for the back of the card. Now for this sentiment that's on the front from the verse from Isaiah, you're going to need a 3 by 3 1/4 inch piece of Whisper White, and that's what you're going to stamp that sentiment on. So 3 by 3 1/2, and then you're also going to need a border of a scallop oval that fits behind that Stitch Shapes framelit die cut, and that's 3 1/4 by 3 1/2 of Tranquil Tide, and that'll cut out the border that's going to go behind the verse of Isaiah. You're also going to need a 2 1/4 by 3 1/4 piece of Whisper White, and that's what we're going to be die cutting out the cross that's inlaid in the back. So that's 2 1/4 by 3 1/4. So to get started, what I did is I folded my card. So I folded my card, and you fold the pieces in towards the middle and back out again. So your card is going to have this shape to it. So that's the shape of the card. Now it's best to get this back part done and the 2 sides before we put the bridge on. So what I did is I stamped the foliage that's going to go in there. Now I just stamped the one image this way and then turned it and did the image this way. And I kind of crossed them right in the middle, but it doesn't matter that's a little clustered there because we're going to be die cutting out the cross with this open cross here that's a total one, and it die cuts out the cross that's found in the stamp set. So we're going to die cut that out, but whenever we die cut that out, we end up with a piece of the cross that actually is quite attractive and can be used on another stamp set project. So what I did then is I adhered that to the middle. So this was the piece that I die cut out, and I just adhered that to the middle of the card. Then I took my 2 1/4 by 3 1/4 inch piece of paper and I die cut out the cross from that die cut. Then I took this and I inlaid it into the cutout of that solid cross. So you just inlay that. And this is a good time to put a little embellishment on it because I did it afterwards and it was a little difficult. But I just used the smallest pearls that you can find in our pearl jewels, and I just put one on each of the middles on this design. And then as you can see, it just has a little bit of something in the middle that just piques your interest there on the back. Okay, so then the next thing I did on this card is I adhered the fresh florals strips on the sides here. Just put a little glue there so I have a little wiggle room because I want to make sure that I have a 1/4 inch border around that panel. So I put a fresh florals there. And like I said, this fresh florals is really pretty in all of our in colors. I could have used this flowery image because it really pairs well with this image, but I thought it was a little bit too busy. So I went with the trellis pattern that's on the designer series paper. And then I just centered it on the panel. And we are almost done with the card already. The next thing we're going to do is stamp that sentiment on our Whisper White that's 3/4 by 5 1/4, and we're going to adhere it to the bridge. So this is the bridge that was 5 1/2 by 1 inch. A great way to use up all those pieces of scraps that are in your scrap box. And then we're going to adhere this to the front of the card. And I just adhered it, I put my adhesive on the designer paper because I didn't want too much of the adhesive to go over. So I just found where I wanted it to be here and adhered it on this side. And then I folded the card as if it was going into the envelope. And then you just make sure it's nice and strong adhered. This glue is, the Tombow glue is very strong adhesive, and if you have the time to sit here and hold it, it's great. If not, I would use my Fast Fuse or I'd use my tear and tape. So now, as you can see, the card is coming right along. The next thing I did was I stamped my sentiment from Isaiah in the Tranquil Tide ink, and I die cut it with the next to the largest oval stitched shape. And then I adhered it to a Tranquil Tide border that was just a little bit bigger than the stitch shape. I love these layering ovals because they create just the perfect amount of border. Some of the older dies made it really big, but this is just like a nice tight border around that. And then I put this on with some dimensionals. So what I did is I actually put my dimensionals, 3 of them fit very nicely on this side. So I just put them right next to each other. And then I peeled off the adhesive backing. And then I adhered the sentiment. And you'll see when the card's open, if you keep the stamped foliage on that panel on the inside of the card off to the right, since your focal point is on the left of this card, then you tend to see the pretty foliage on the right side of the back panel. So we're almost finished, but we need a place to write a message. So on the back, that's where I usually put them on my fun folds. You're going to stamp a little bit of the foliage or maybe another sentiment from the stamp set, whatever you desire. And then put some adhesive. Now I would suggest, I've got some cards in the mail that people, and I've seen some demonstrators on videos, lobbing a whole bunch of glue over a panel that you're going to write on. And I've got a couple swaps that showed, it shows the glue. So if you're going to use glue, only put it around the corners, but it's almost better to just put some snail adhesive in the corners, because if you put a lot of glue across here, when it dries, it kind of has bumps in it when you write on it. So that's one thing I've found. So I've started either just putting a little bit of adhesive in the corners on there or the snail just on the corners. So that finishes off the back of the card. And as you can see on this one, I didn't take the time to put the pearls in, but you can see on the finished card how those pearls just add that little bit of something. Now, if you would like to make this card, you can find the dimensions and all the supplies I used on my blog, cindyleebedesigns.com. You can ask me any questions by emailing me at cindyleeb@gmail.com, or you can call or text me at 724-323-2296. Thanks for buzzing by, friends.